Welcome back to DreamHack Tonight, everybody. I'm Reinessa, and this is my host, Nahaz, and today we're going to talk about speedrunning. I thought we'd speedrun you through the intro there.
Speedrun the intro?
How'd I do?
I like it. I like it. Yeah, I still kind of can't. There's a part of me that still kind of can't believe that this is a thing. I remember. I kid you not. Like I think I was in 8th grade at the time, and we had the very first Ninja Gaiden game for the original 8-bit Nintendo, and a friend of mine and I would see how fast we could get through certain of the levels. Especially there are a couple of them with like these really ridiculous jumps. You know, shout out to 6-2. Anyway. Point being, you know, you fast forward literally 30 years, and I see one day by pure chance, I see AGDQ on the front page of Twitch, and it was right as they passed they had raised $1 million for Doctors Without Borders. And I mean, I just about was in tears to see something that I had just randomly done with my nerdy friends in junior high get so big and have so much success, particularly as a part of charity. It was amazing, and it's something that I think is just an absolute hoot. And yes, I'm saying that. I'm very freaking old. Deal with it.
Oh, gosh. So it's cool. I'm glad you brought up All Games Done Quick and the charity element, because, you know, that's one of the great things that I always see speedrunning kind of linked with the charity events. And, you know, that's what we're going to see at DreamHack Beyond, which is getting very close. Like all these pieces are falling into place, and we're going to have more and more announcements rolling out. But if you don't know what it is, we have built DreamHack the video game. So everything you'd see at a normal DreamHack is gamified. You go into a digital festival, you have to pick up your ticket. There are quests, there are achievements, there are things to unlock, there are video games to test and try out from indie developers and you know, the bigger publishers and everything. There's all those things. And so, just like a normal DreamHack, we have speedrunning, and it's going to be this marathon charity event all week long. And I just think it's so cool, because saying speedrunning is kind of like saying esports, right? It's like just as big. But when you say esports, you link it to like big prize money. When you say speedrunning, you really do link it to charity. And I'm really glad to kind of see that, you know, this is going to keep happening with DreamHack Beyond as well.
And it's really cool, because I think that's one of the, as an economist anyway, that's one of my big fascinations with live streaming and YouTube content, is that it's just added a lot of value to the way that people can experience games. And that's kind of the thing that they speed run some of these like truly original 8-bit Nintendo games. I mean, I'm literally watching this dude the first time I saw it play A Boy and His Blob, and all of a sudden he like breaks the game, and 5 minutes after starting is completely finished, and it just blows my mind. And it's cool because you get all the nostalgia of experiencing a game that you may have played and you may have loved, but it's in a way that you never would have imagined. So I think it's just amazing.
Yeah. Well, we don't have to sit here, the two of us, we are not the speedrunning experts. We do have someone. We've got ProAceJoker joining the show. He's a friend of mine. We have our own podcast that we do together. So I've spent a lot of time with this guy, and he is a phenomenal Halo speedrunner. Hey, Joker.
Heyo, how you guys doing?
I'm
doing great, man. I'm really excited to meet you, and I was glad Nessa picked somebody from a community like Halo, where it sort of touches all bases. Where you know, Halo is a competitive title, and it's also branched out into this world as well. So I'm curious to hear you talk about some of the connections there.
Yeah, Halo sits in an interesting place with speedrunning in general, because speedrunning is a giant community encompassing a lot of different games and a lot of different communities, but there's a lot of kind of nests and stuff like that. Like certain games fit into certain bubbles, right? So it's interesting because a lot of games are actually separate from some other ones, right? It tends to be that a lot of the Nintendo games tend to get put together So you get a lot of like the Legend of Zelda, the Super Marios, all of those games kind of sit in their own bubble. And Halo's kind of in a bubble in its own. And it's got to do with the community around it and the viewers around it. Halo is is kind of a weird circumstance, and it's surprisingly so, is that a lot of people who are interested in watch Halo speedrunning in general aren't really that into speedruns. They're actually more into Halo than they are the speedrunning of it. So weirdly, you don't see a lot of cross. I mean, there are plenty of people that watch multiple speedruns, but yeah, Halo's a weird game in that regards. So, and I think it happens more often than not that people are really there for the game than they are for speedrunning as a whole. Which is a shame, because I think most people, there's a lot of games out there that a lot of people can enjoy, which we can get into later. I have a lot of recommendations for some amazing speedruns.
So when I met you about a little over a year ago, DreamHack Anaheim, you were kind of casting and helping run competitive Halo speedrunning, which is also where Halo's a little different too, because you guys actually compete at it.
Yeah, that was a really fun event. Yeah, I was brought in for the DreamHack Anaheim to curate a Halo speedrunning tournament event, and I was there with our good buddy DJ Blue, and we just pretty much sat there 8 hours every day casting this live stream of people who were coming in, and all were welcome. I mean, it was a really awesome event. We actually had some quote unquote professional speedrunners. There were guys who had world record times before. And then we also had a lot of people who were amateurs who had never done it before. And amazingly, one of those guys actually ended up winning 3rd place. So he ended up winning some prize money.
Wow.
Was one of these people, ended up upsetting people who had run a lot. Is that it was a really amazing event where we had people who had been doing it for years who were there helping people who had never done it before either. It was a really awesome, lots of camaraderie. It was a lot of fun.
So when you place Halo relative to the other games on the speedrunning spectrum, like I see a lot of games where there's a lot of, it's mostly just emphasis on manipulating RNG states and doing everything in the correct order. So it's really kind of a giant game of chess. And there are other games I see that where there's really a lot of technical skill involved, and it's more about the reflexes and timing and skill of the runner. Where does Halo fit on that spectrum of runs?
So this is one of the things that I personally like, and it's why I have a hard time picking another game to speedrun outside of Halo. There's 3 there's 3 points on this kind of spectrum of where games sit, right? Like if you put you have one of those graphs of there's 3 main ones. There's luck, there's skill, and then there's glitches is the 3 points. And so Halo sits in a particular, on the spectrum, it's depending on what version. So I play on Legendary, so I play on the harder difficulty of it, right? You also can play on easy difficulty, are the 2 main categories for Halo speedrunning. If you play on easy difficulty, it turns the game into more of a glitch and skill rating, and not as much on the RNG. A lot more of it, or the luck. There's not as much luck involved because the game is just easier. Whereas when you're playing on the harder difficulty, you start running into enemies, can be more accurate, less accurate. There's more enemy spawns, different kinds of enemy spawns. And there's a little bit of it all involved in each game a lot of time. Oh, well, some games are all RNG. If you play like Yu-Gi-Oh! People play Yu-Gi-Oh! With the something Fates or Forbidden Fates or something along those lines. That is all RNG. They play like 100%. So, and the way you have to do that is you have to get literally every single card in the game. But a lot of it is luck and a lot of luck manipulation. There's tricks that you do with that, but it's kind of just playing through it and hoping things go well for you.
Well, it's mind-blowing to me. You say luck, but I watch these guys run like the Final Fantasy games, and they're walking in like a particular pattern and going, well, if I take a step left here and then I go down this passage, I get an encounter here, and that's exactly as much experience. And I'm like, are you kidding? I mean, like, I thought I played these games a lot as a kid. I had no idea half of this shit was a thing.
Yeah, there's a lot of weird things that games do. I think it's one of the coolest things. I come from a background of game design and stuff like that. I think, go off on a little side tangent, I started, the very first speedrun I ever watched was a Ocarina of Time, Legend of Zelda speedrun, which is the like 20-minute, I think at the time. Yeah, at the time the record was like 28 minutes, and it's way less than that. Because they do some crazy stuff, which I can get into because it's some, I'll get into in a second, but I think that was back in 2008. At the time I was 14 years old. No, was I? Yes, I think 14 years old. 14 years old. I was at a school, like this summer school thing for game programming. So I was a game programmer, and the teachers, during whenever we were just working, would just throw up speedruns onto the screen. And this is back when there was a little bit of surgence for speedrunning. So we saw like Super Mario 64 120-star runs. We saw some Mega Man runs. We saw a lot of the classics that I think a lot of people know about. But then we watched all that, and I didn't really get into speedrunning until about 6 years ago now. 2018 or something along those lines. Maybe it was earlier. Oh man, I might have gotten the very first
timelines right now.
2008. Yeah, 2008.
Right.
Oh,
yeah.
right
the
now,
timelines right now are so hard because you feel like Anaheim still feels like it was a month ago, even though it was almost a year and a half ago. So timelines are weird. Anyway, sorry. Continue.
No, it's weird that I got into something so far down the line from what I enjoyed watching such a long time ago. Because there's definitely been a resurgence. I mean, you were talking about, it surprised you seeing this content and seeing how popular it is on Twitch and stuff like that. And I have my own concepts on that is completely unrelated. But yeah, it's speedrunning combined a really cool, is that we see these waves in media where people tend to switch between enjoying competitive stuff and casual stuff. Competitive is always the staple. No matter what happens, everyone goes back to esports, and competitive gaming is always the most watched thing out there. But then people kind of need a break from it, and they move on to something else. That's where we got Let's Plays. That's where we got just casual playthroughs. We got group playthroughs. And then this is where we also got speedrunning. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, is that speedrunning kind of sat in this thing where it was competitive, but for casual, right? It's a competitive casual market where you're playing against the game. You're not playing against other people. And so it fit this good thing for it to really set to explode in popularity, and that's kind of what we saw, and that's where we see how crazy the GDQs are and stuff like that. So I sort of wonder, because I have a friend who is a really good Mega Man speedrunner. I used to watch a lot several years ago.
The very first game? The very first Mega Man?
This is not a good question to ask.
Sorry. I actually loved those games back in the day. But
I mean, I can pull up the Twitch channel and
no,
streams. I've never checked in for a while. But so there were elements, right? So it was a good friend, someone I'd known for forever, make fun of each other a lot. And like, when he got it, you were really happy for him. When he missed it, you were kind of like, and it's kind of like watching a Dark Souls player or a Stanley Parable playthrough. Like, I feel like a lot of people are there, like you're there for the elated joy when you do something really hard, and you're also there for the utter misery when the RNG doesn't go that way, when you miss the glitch, when you I feel like the stakes are so high, and that's what makes it back fun.
Even farther than that, right? I mean, that's what was remarkable to me was, I remember being in 8th grade, in the 1990s, and and sitting on a couch with other people playing 8-bit, and then it got, you know, when the Super Nintendo came out, we all went crazy, right? But you're playing against your buddies, and like when they beat the boss, you're like, yeah, awesome. But then when they die, you're like, ha ha. I mean, this is it replicates a part of that experience that, you know, I love esports, and I've obviously been involved there, but it brings back some of those memories in a way that esports never did. And I think that's just, it's so cool. You know, it's one of those things where I saw it on AGDQ and I'm like, what? How did I miss this?
So what are the personality traits though, right? Because we're talking, I'm comparing it to Dark Souls, where you're willing to be miserable, right? Like what personality traits make a speedrunner?
So it's funny you mentioned Dark Souls, because Dark Souls is one of the few games that I could see myself transitioning to as a speedrunner. As a Halo speedrunner, also playing Dark Souls. It's one of the few, like, I've thought about doing the Splinter Cell games, but I looked up some speedruns, and I'm a big fan of that series. So I was like, oh, maybe that's something I could try and speedrun. But it was too much on that spectrum again. It was too much skill, not enough glitches, not enough luck for me. I really like a good combo of it all. And it's why Halo is such a specific game for me. And Dark Souls very much sits in that category. There's a lot of skill involved. There's a lot of RNG, but there's a lot of really cool glitches. And I'm really big into crazy looking glitches, and it just looks flashy and showing off, and I like showing off to people. So Dark Souls is a funny that you mention it, but because that's absolutely one that I've thought about.
This is your fault, okay? But so
and Nahaz loves Dark Souls, by the way. He loves watching the no-hit runs.
So no, I watch a lot of a guy called the Happy Hob, he's a weird dude, but he's funny, and he does Dark Souls no hit runs, and you know, which, you know, to me is kind of an offshoot.
Craziest thing I've ever seen.
So what I want to know though is, what's interesting to me is that you get these games where over time, and you're also talking about glitches, over time a set of parameters evolves in terms of what's acceptable in this run and what's not, you know, any percent versus 100%. But even like in Dark Souls, even what constitutes a hit? Is it a no hit run or a no damage run? Those are two very different things. That process fascinates me, because what really strikes me is the end result of that process, which evolves in the communities over many months, many years even, is it tends to be something that's actually really cool. Like the end result tends to be really compelling to watch. So have you been a part of that kind of a process of the setting of what you can and can't do in a particular run? And what to you is the objective when you're thinking about that?
Everyone makes up their own rules. Every community makes up their own rules. It's all up to the people playing. I got into Halo speedrunning right when Halo speedrunning was exploding. Particularly, we have a website called HaloRuns.com that's the official place that we track all the records and stuff like that. And it's you know, that's very different, because there's Speedrun.com that a lot of people use for a lot of games use for their own official thing. But we just decided we wanted our own location that we could manage, we could run, and all that stuff. And it was interesting, because when I started speedrunning, I was doing stuff that wasn't technically official, right? So I had like skulls on and things like that. And now they have all these different categories that you can do accordingly. And it's just one of those, what it comes down to, it's however people want to play the game and however people want to make up the rules. And then you kind of workshop from there and decide what's the most balanced way to do it, what's the most fair, what's the most like least it changes for everyone, what's the most standardized way you can make it so that anyone could do it and it's the same experience for everyone. But there's also meme categories and stuff like that where people are just doing crazy runs just for the heck of it, and it's really fun. So
do you think the entertainment value comes into it? I've always been curious, because at the end of the day,
of course. I mean, it's so Nessa asked what kind of personalities make a good speedrunner. People get bored easily, is the thing. Like most people get into speedrunning because they're bored of the games that they have. I got into it because I was at a point where I really didn't have any games to play. I was just bored every time I booted. I wanted to play games, but I didn't know what I wanted to do because I was like, I've kind of beat everything. I don't really have anything on the docket. Nothing's really interesting me. So I got into speedrunning because honestly, I was bored of everything I had. And I was like, this is a cool thing that gives me a goal to work towards that I can constantly improve. And that's one of those is it's people who are perfectionists tend to be are good speedrunners, things like that, because you always can do a few seconds faster, and so it just motivates you to go again and again and again and again. Because yeah, it takes a little bit of a crazy person to be, I've played all of the Halo games at this point thousands of times, and that's a lot for anybody. So
what's the length of a full run when you do a full one?
Obviously it depends on each game, but Halo
your
is
favorite
weirdly
Halo.
We've weirdly made all the Halo games take about an hour and a half. We've somehow average, if you combine them all, shorter even now is, new tricks have keep being found even years later. More things are discovered now that Halo is on PC. They can really dig in. They can actually look at the scripts and the coding of it, pull all that out and see exactly what things they can manipulate, and you create tools and stuff that we use. Even there's a trick that we do that's a crazy looking. We get a vehicle and we fly through the entire map, but you have to do it very precisely because you still have to trigger all the load zones. It's just you miss an initial load zone that breaks the rest of the level, so nothing has any collision, so you can just fly through everything, but you still have to trigger every single load zone. So, and they're all invisible. You can't see them. You don't get any indicator. So people have literally made a tool that you can go and practice this, where it shows you exactly where everyone is, and they shows you the boundaries of each one. And so, and that was just a year or two ago that was really discovered. And some of these have been known forever. There's tricks that we find that we've known for years and years, but there's no way to do it unless you're playing like co-op. But then we find a way to do it in single player. And so it's just people finding tricks. I methere are people who are they're trick finders. They're not even speedrunners. Yep. They don't actually play through all the games. All they do is they find glitches and tricks, and it's just people who are bored, I think, more than anything, and are looking for something to do. So
yeah, a new way to play the game. Okay, all these bugs, glitches, tricks, and everything. I don't know how much interaction you've had with developers, but lots. What is your sense? Yeah, do developers like speedrunners, or do they not so much like all the exploits being shown?
I'm gonna throw one company under the bus. Not if you're Bungie. Bungie hates speedrunners.
Wow.
Bungie
hates everybody though, right?
To tell that little story. When Destiny 1 was coming out, there was a message. Someone asked them a question during an AMA. Hey, are you going to be able to speedrun the game? And they straight up put on, well, we don't recommend it because you won't, we feel you're going to miss out the experience of how we create this game and all the beauty of it and stuff. And I'm like, I don't think they understand speedrunners. Speedrunners don't tend to be people who play the game the very first time they play the game, they're speedrunning it, right? Like, the reason we're Halo speedrunners is I've played through the Halo campaigns not speedrunning in a casual, I enjoyed it, 30 times before, and it was like, oh, this is just a new way to play the game. I love the story of it, I love the world of it, I love the game itself. That's why I'm okay with speedrunning it. And Bungie doesn't seem to understand that, so they literally have implemented systems into Destiny that 100% prevent speedrunning. A good comparison is Borderlands. You can kill the final boss in Borderlands at level 2, right? If you really want it. It'll take you a long time, unless you're using all the speedrun glitches and stuff. It would take you a long time, be really hard because you die in one shot and you do no damage, but you could do it. You at least do damage. Bungie now has implementations that if you're too many levels below, all enemies are completely immortal. You do no damage kind of thing. And I'm 90% sure that was added into the game after this discussion because they wanted to just 100% stop speedrunners from going too fast. So they force you to level your character up at points. which
No,
there are games that do
I think
that
that's
on the
a-
occasion too. So
It's a good trap. It's a
it
trap
sucks.
a lot of developers fall
it
into,
sucks,
I think.
but I can tell you most developers is a love-hate relationship.
Yeah.
They hate that all these bugs and glitches are being shown, but they love and think it's the coolest stuff in the world too. They love watching it. I have a lot of, I've gotten to meet a lot of developers through doing it. I'm buddies with a lot of the 343 Industries people. For Halo, they'll come to me to ask about stuff all the time. They work with the speedrunners to make sure their game is speedrunnable. When Master Chief Collection was coming out, they brought in 2 of the speedrunners to speedrun every single Halo game to make sure the glitches that were in the game before were still in the game. They didn't want to patch. They wanted to make sure. Yeah, they didn't want to. They wanted to make sure none of the tricks in the game were fixed. They didn't accidentally fix it by any way or anything like that. So they brought speedrunners in. So
that sounds like Dota. When Valve ported
Absolutely.
Dota in, there were several things that were basically limits of the Warcraft 3 engine that were kind of bugs, but kind of this is the way it has to be done.
Yep.
And then
these
they
borderline
specifically
interactions,
programmed.
like the fountain hook,
Yeah.
right? That had been famously exploited, and that they wanted to keep in the game. Now, of course, some of them eventually were patched out.
Yeah,
once we started
we've
playing the
lost
game for
a
$30
few.
million.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, maybe it's a good thing speedrunning doesn't have tens of millions on the line.
No, yeah, that's exactly right. And even still, though, I mean, it happens on the rare occasions. Some things are patched. Halo 5 is a good example. We've had some glitches patched that it's okay because we found ways around it. That's the thing, is like they designed Halo 5 was actually partially designed with speedrunners in mind. The way that they designed the levels, they specifically wanted you, they wanted Halo, and 343 has really been trying to make Halo a play the way that you want thing. So they made a lot of scenarios of like, hey, we'll create secret pathways, secret areas that you can go through that can bypass enemies or have extra weapons that'll give you an advantage. That's great and all. It's not necessary, because the fact is, no matter what they're going to do, whatever they create, speedrunners are going to find a faster way to go through it. Crazy glitches, jumping out of the map, whatever it is. So there are some games designed with speedrunners in mind. I'm trying to think, not Braid, but there's some 2D platformers that have come out recently that literally was designed for pretty much speedrunners. They have timers and everything. All the levels are designed to have all these extra paths, and no matter what they create, speedrunners try to find even faster, right? That's just the base version. It's cool that they support it, but
I think there are 2 different things that you want to talk about there. And one is, I think it's really cool that when developers put infrastructure in their game, like timers, like leaderboards in game, I think it's cool to have that kind of infrastructure in the game that supports competitive speedrunning if people start to get interested in it. In terms of designing levels with speedrunning in mind, yeah, I agree with you. I think that the whole point, to me, the whole point and what I find fun about watching speedrunning is it's breaking the game. It's the same impulse that, back when my friends and I would play Final Fantasy 1, right? And hey, you know what? You can duck into this dungeon, and if you don't run into this random encounter, you can grab the silver sword early on, blah, 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 blah. That's the kind of, all of us hardcore gamers have experienced the joy of breaking the game, right? That's, to me, what's so cool about speedrunning is, and you're finding glitches, yes, but the goal of finding glitches isn't to trivialize the challenge of the game. It's to find new challenges, like what you described for Halo. That's what I think is really cool. It's not that, we're exploiting a glitch and we're trivializing the challenges that the developers intended. We're just finding a new set of challenges that we can experience.
There is that section of people too that they see speedrunners and they're like, oh, this isn't a real speedrun because you're bypassing all these enemies and stuff. And I'm like, that's not how that works. I mean, we're still playing through the game. We're not cheating the game. We're not hacking the game. This is all how the game works. It's just not necessarily how you expected it to work. Yeah. Right. So, and again, it's why I like Halos. Halo has a really awesome balance of like, people are always finding ways to skip every single fight, but some of the most entertaining stuff is watching people how they play the game when you do have to actually kill enemies and stuff like that. Watching how people, you know, there's a lot of nuance that comes into it that people probably notice but don't think too much about. Is every weapon is planned out. We know where every weapon in the game is. We know the most efficient way to grab a weapon to use in this counter, in this scenario, switch that weapon out for a specific enemy's weapon, and we know which one that is. And sometimes it has to be is like, it'll only work if you get this particular spawn, so that means this particular enemy spawns with this weapon. And there's a lot of nuance. It's one of those experiences that the more you play it, a lot of speedrunning becomes muscle memory, but then it eventually, you start learning the game to a deeper knowledge than anyone else. Like, it is one of those things
that's what's so impressive to me.
Yeah, when you watch something,
you'll get these guys at AGDQ that will talk about, okay, well, if I were doing this at home and I got this spawn, I would just reset. But because I'm doing it live, I had to think about, what am I going to do if I get this unfavorable spawn to still... I think that like that kind of thinking, to me, is the giveaway that the people that are like, well, you're just exploiting glitches are stupid. Because this requires an understanding of the game engine and the limitations of the player and the enemy at a far deeper level than anybody, like... in some sense, a lot of esports titles require. So that's we know
more than the developers do. We know more about the games than the developers do. We do. I've had devs reach out to me when I did my AGDQ run for Halo 4. I had one of the developers for Halo 4 reach out to me, and they gave me a few cool Easter eggs. And he was, there was one glitch that I was talking about in the game where there's this big epic moment in Halo 4 on a level called Shutdown, where you have to go, you get in a Pelican for the first time in the Halo franchise. Officially, you get into a Pelican and you get to fly it around. You go out in this giant floating landscape where there's two giant pillars and a third one in the center. You're supposed to go to the two pillars, go inside of them, do some side missions in here, and then it opens up the entrance to the third pillar. But for just some random reason, you can bypass the two pillars, fly directly to the center one, and there's a hole. There's a random hole that's perfectly the size of your Pelican that you can just fly through, which then, it's just a hole in the door that you can then get out of, and then everything works. The level works totally fine. You just bypass everything. And when I was explaining it, I was like, this was probably used as a debugging purpose.
Exactly.
Right? They use this as they don't want to play the whole level. They need to test to make sure that the final part of the level loaded everything correctly from the beginning of the level. And so they did that. And yeah, I had a guy reach out. He's like, dude, you nailed it. Like, we use that for debugging, but he explained the trivia there. Yeah. Well, they did. They actually did patch it out. But then they broke the build doing something else, and they had to reset the build. And when they reset it, they forgot that they had patched it. So when they actually they kept working, and then it ended up just staying in the game by the end of it. So
that's cool.
Yeah, there's a lot of that.
I was able to literally backtrace exactly what version they had to revert. Right. Oh, that's so cool. I mean, when you think about how many steps like that happen in development.
Oh God, and that's, I think Nessa, she mentioned one of my favorite games, Stanley Parable. I use it to teach game design and stuff like that. It's such a good example of this. Is every time you think you found some cool trick or some cool glitch, there's a very high chance the developers already know about it. They just didn't think to take the time to patch it out, and that was what Stanley Parable is about. Is no matter what you do in the game, the developers have already thought of the solution to that, and they are very aware. You think you're glitching out by jumping out of a window, by doing all these weird crouch jumps and stuff, but that in itself becomes a story in the game, and they narrate it and everything, and it's great, because that's exactly what happens. Now, that being said, there's lots of glitches that the developers never saw. Halo and stuff has some amazing stuff these days that it's just beyond what anyone thought. I think, it's one of the cool things is, as I said, I come from a game designer, game developer perspective, you learn a lot about how games are developed. I always talk about the Ocarina of Time, the Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time wrong warping. That's the main glitch used in any percent runs. So doesn't matter what you collect, it's just about beating the game from the beginning to the end as quickly as possible using whatever glitches is what really any percent is. Wrong warping is a really cool manipulation that has so much into it, and it's completely based on how the game is designed. How to give the quick explanation, how wrong warping works is at the end of every dungeon, there's a portal that you enter that, you know, it takes Link up into the sky, and then it plays a cutscene, and then you're outside of the dungeon at the beginning of it, and that's just how you exit it, because they decide whenever you're in the boss room of a dungeon, they lock the door behind you. So, but what they do is they do this crazy thing where they flip into the warp zone, and they play the ocarina, which then puts them in a weird state where the game is actually playing the cutscene of you exiting, but you're able to control your character. So you then are able to do they do a button combo, and they don't have to do the combo. It's about tracking how much time has passed, and then they enter they exit out of the actual door they came into at the exact right frame, which then teleports them to the end of the game. And it's because of the way the game is designed. Back then, games are very hard to program. The way that it's designed is when you enter in one of those warps, every single warp in the game takes a different amount of time down to the frame. You don't notice it as a player because it's such a small amount of time. But as you get sucked up into the sky and it plays a little cutscene, when it fades to white, everything is down to a frame. And depending on what frame that happens, that's how the game knows to put you at certain points back at the entrance of the dungeon. Is that every time it goes up, it takes a certain amount of time, which then equates to knowing where to put you in the game. And it's a really, really smart way to actually program it. But as soon as you break that, you can now go anywhere in the game. And so it happens that the very first dungeon of the game happens to be on top. The dungeon of it happens to be on top of the very last area of the game, right? So it turns out if you manipulate it perfectly, the game reads you as exiting at a different time frame, which then tells you, oh, hey, you're actually supposed to be here. And that's where it puts you. So it's really crazy. It's a really cool thing, but there's so much that goes into it. Now we're seeing it with Halo. This coming GDQ, Halo 2 is going to be played. Mr. Monopoly is running it, and it's going to be a Halo run that no one has seen before, ever, if you're not at a GDQ, because we have found some crazy stuff. They have found some amazing things where we've now figured out how to manipulate the item inventory of the game, so you can now become other characters. So there's a moment in the speedrun now, he becomes a phantom. He literally turns Master Chief into a phantom and flies to the end of the level with it. So it's really crazy. It's really, really cool. So, yeah.
Very cool. There's so many. I don't understand how you keep them all straight in your head. Like one of the things I wanted to ask was what was one of your favorite
obsessive
glitches,
knowledge. Yeah. Oh yeah, it's my obsessive knowledge of gaming. I know. My head is filled with all of that and not actual useful information.
Hey, it's useful for us.
It's so, and you say I knew you wanted to ask what was some of my favorite glitches. There's a lot out there, and there's so many cool, unique things that have each one is different. So really, what I was going to do is just some games I would recommend is like personally right now I think like Halo 1 I think is really cool. It's got an amazing balance of actually, you know, fighting enemies, but doing it in a very quick way with glitches and stuff like that. But Halo 5, surprisingly, has some of the coolest glitches in Halo that I've seen. They have some really awesome, unique things. I just learned one recently of how you can basically control a ghost. You can control a vehicle, but you're invisible. So you can then bypass all the enemies, or you can kill whatever enemies you want because you're invisible and they don't see you. And you're not really invisible, so that's a whole thing. But, you know, some of the runs I always recommend, Dark Souls is a fun one to watch. Super Meat Boy is a great one. That's a nice classic. Again, the classics Super Mario 64 and Ocarina of Time are always good to watch. I love watching Hades. Hades is a really cool speed run. I'm trying to remember. There's so many I've watched, and I'd have to go through the list of GDQ because I'm sure I would see the game. I'm like, that's the one. Every time. There are runs that every time they come up, I always need to check them out. Mirror's Edge is a great one. And it just depends what you're into. I think that's what's great is, you know, back to the personality trait thing a little bit. I think people play speedrunning for different reasons, and there are different people that do them. And that's why you get people who play each of the different games, right? I think there are people who won't enjoy watching a Halo speedrun, but they would enjoy watching an Ocarina of Time speedrun, or they would enjoy a Splinter Cell speedrun. A Splinter Cell speedrun, like I said, is very much, it's all skill-based. You have to do everything in a very particular order. Like, there's some where you just jump out a window and then jump back into a window because it's just perfectly timed that's how you kind of bypass an enemy seeing you and things like that. It's really cool, but there's not a lot of glitches. So if you're one of those people who wants a game who doesn't see a lot of glitches, that's a good one for it because it's really about enemy manipulation. You just shoot the wall at certain points and then you just run through it as fast as you can. So
no, I love the way that you answered that you're talking about this, because, you know, to me, that's the ultimate response to the people that suggest that, no, this isn't really what the developers intended, or, oh, this is just exploiting glitches. Or the beauty of games is that they challenge us in different ways, and they reward us for overcoming those challenges. And, you know, speedrunning is nothing but changing the set of parameters, changing the nature of the challenge, so that who doesn't want to experience their favorite game or reread their certain novel, their favorite novel in a different way. And that's what these guys are doing. And it's so neat. And at the same time, I wanted to ask you, what stands out to me, the speedrunning community has had such success with charity. Much more so in some ways than a lot of the esports that you described earlier that may have bigger viewer numbers or whatnot. What do you think it is about speedrunning in the speedrunning community that's enabled them to have such amazing success in terms of organizing gamers as a force for charity?
You know, I think that's a really tough question, because I think it really just has to do with the community who's backing it and just the love for it. Because I think part of the reason why speedrunning has existed and lived on as long as it has is because of the, like I said earlier, you can never get the perfect time, right? You always find a new glitch that then makes it you are now working towards trying to get that perfect run, the golden god run that no one will ever get, right? Where there's zero mistakes and you did everything perfectly efficient. That's just nearly impossible to do. Whereas, because what it comes down to is speedrunning is a challenge, right? Speedrunning is a challenge way to play the game. But with most other challenges, it's a one and done, right? If it's like, you play Legend of Zelda, but you're only allowed to use certain items, right? Or you play Halo and you're only allowed to use certain weapons. You do that, but once you do that, you're done. I mean, you've successfully done it. There's not really a new way to play, you know, if you're using Plasma Pistol only Halo. Once you beat Plasma Pistol only Halo, there's not a new way to do Plasma Pistol only Halo. Maybe a faster way, but that's a different challenge now, right? But speedrunning is something that it lends itself to being replayable. It's constantly watchable. It's very exciting. Seeing people get world records and stuff like that is very entertaining. Nessa said earlier, is you feel involved, you feel connected to the event and it's the running event itself, of seeing people go through it fast and hoping that they could do better than they ever have, or maybe worse than they ever have. And I think a lot of why it was so successful is, honestly, it's just the community that's behind it, the people who are running that event, and how it's gotten promoted on Twitch and how entertaining it is that it just leads to it's kind of a combo of everything. You know, it's a 7-day event, so it's constant no matter where you are, what time zone you are, you're able to watch it. It's every game known to man, from platformers to puzzle games to card games to RTSs and FPSs and third person, whatever game it is, it exists in GDQ. So no matter what you're into, you're interested. It targets every single gamer in the world.
And you really do feel that sense of community too. Like
right.
I
and
think
we're all
the
there
runners
for
crediting
reason,
each other with this guy
Mhm.
came up with this glitch, this guy came up with this skip. That's where you really start to realize that, you know, I mean, they're citing each other for things as carefully as we would in academia writing papers. And that right. To me is really cool that it's not, when you get that world record run, especially at an event like AGDQ, it really does feel like a community accomplishment.
And it is. I mean, it's all building these runs, building these routes. There's not a single game that one single person developed the entire run and that's it. Because people find new stuff, they try new things, they find faster routes, and every time they do it, some people like, you know, they question, they're like, why don't you just like find a new trick and then don't tell anyone so you can get world record? It's like, well, yeah, sure, I could do that, but as soon as I post the world record, everyone knows about it, right? It's a one-time thing. What's the purpose? Like, it's just about showing it off so that other people can do it just as well. That you can't really hide stuff with the internet now, so don't even why do it? Is there's definitely a sense of camaraderie between the communities and stuff, and yeah, it's interesting. It's hard to honestly explain why it's been so successful with charity. I think it's just there's a love for it, all right? It just shows the people who are speedrunners are some of the most passionate people for that video game. They love that game more than most people on the planet because they play it. You know, I've put in over 10,000 hours on Halo campaign. There are so few people in the world who can say that. And if I didn't like Halo, I don't think I'd be able to do that, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's the case for everyone. And I think again, it's a combination of everything. Seeing people who are that passionate about something is awesome for not only the other players, but even the developers, right? They love seeing people who are that into their 100%. Games. I think it's good for them. So, all
right. Well, if someone wanted to see you play your mobile games, speedrun Halo, let's do some Joker shout outs so that people can come ask more questions about speedrunning, because we covered a lot of like basics, but yeah, like I said, Joker knows it all. So how do people find you? What do you want to promote?
I've got so many stories of it. As I said, I mean, speedrunning for me has not only just been about playing the games and getting to understand the games more than the developers do, knowing the ins and outs of how, again, we literally know what spawn timers are. Like, we know the exact moments and load zones where enemies spawn. Is like, developers are in awe of how much we know about the games that they created, and I think it's weird for them as it is cool. And man, I have stories for days about what you've learned for, like, as I said, from a game design perspective, from a community perspective. I've got so many stories that you can find if you want to check it all out. Pretty much, it's just ProAceJoker on everywhere. Twitter, YouTube's, Twitch, and stuff like that. I mostly stream on Twitch, but I have been making a lot of YouTube content and other things like that. But if you're looking for speedrunning content specifically, YouTube and Twitch is best places for that. So,
nice.
All right.
Well, thanks for joining us, Joker. This was a fascinating look. And now I kind of want to go learn how to play Halo so I can fly through the little thing and everything. I don't know. That would sound cool.
I'm sure. I'm sure it won't take you any time at all.
No, none whatsoever. I'll be right up there in those 1.5-hour records with Joker in no time. That's how I play video games. What do you think, Nahaz? How was your dive into speedrunning?
I mean, it's so cool. One of the things I find most unhealthy that we as gamers tend to do is it tends to be very binary. It tends to be either I love this game, how dare you say anything negative about it, or this is the worst thing ever. The developers are evil. They're trying to take your money. What I actually love the fact that we celebrate finding the glitches, and you can get these people that have played a game for 10,000 hours that will almost lovingly complain about it. I think that, you know, that's these things that we do all the time, and they're big parts of our lives. We always have a love-hate relationship with. I mean, quit fighting it. So I love it. I'm a religious AGDQ and SGDQ viewer. I hope more people will be, and I'm excited to see DreamHack and others get involved in that space, because that community, I think, it should be even bigger than it is.
And we have a lot of fun doing creative things with speedrunning, like we were talking about with Joker, doing the speedrunning competition back at Anaheim, now at Beyond. We're going to have these big charity marathons. So if you want to watch some speedrunning, if you want to learn, if you want to hang out with us at DreamHack, it is a free to attend event, digital video game experience. You're going to go to dreamhack.com/beyond to learn more about it. You can sign up to speedrun yourself. You can follow the Twitch channels where you're going to catch all of it. You can compete in Griffball and Hearthstone and Rocket League and Apex and a bunch of other things. So go ahead, dreamhack.com/beyond, reserve your free ticket, see what there is to compete in, cosplay, battle of bands. We got all of it. And we're going to keep rolling out these DreamHack Tonight episodes every week to keep telling you about it. So for now, thank you for joining us. Go ahead and drop a comment for what you're most excited for at Beyond. And Nahaz and I will see you next week with our next little sneak peek of what's happening at the event. Thanks for watching, everyone.